Jalen Carter. It's been now a month or so since we heard the news. What do you think from what you've heard recently about whether or not he's going to drop all that much?
I don't think he's going to drop at all. So I think whatever's happened in the pre-draft process, I'm going to pretend that it didn't happen. Now, I'm not the one signing the checks, but in terms of from my seat, how am I projecting? Not even his NFL projection. How am I projecting where he goes in the draft? I don't think anything that's happened in the past 3 months is going to weigh anything. I mean, I think he got screened, got interviewed, got asked questions, maybe got made uncomfortable, but push comes to shove. Whoever wanted Jalen Carter last October still wants Jalen Carter.
And so so basically you're still talking about, now again, the quarterback position is really just that's the only other thing that's going to knock these guys down. But Carter and Anderson, let's say that let's even just talk about the draft itself, just the teams that are in the top 10, top 5 that we know need quarterbacks, or the ones that don't need quarterbacks. So that means that if Arizona stays pretty much where they are, 3, maybe they move down a spot, they're still going to end up with either player, and Anderson seems like the more logical choice. So if that's the case, Carter, does he just go, who's 5? Seattle. And that's what we talked about on our mock, that would be Seattle would love that, and that's going to be that's going to be a distinct possibility.
Can I make a trade prediction?
Okay.
I believe draft night, Philadelphia is going to trade up from 10 to 5. And if they need to, they'll package number 30 overall. They'll send both of them to Seattle. Maybe they can get a third-round pick in back, because that favors Seattle a little too much when you look at the new draft value chart. But I think the Eagles are going to end up with Jalen Carter.
Who did we when we did our thing, we said Philadelphia could trade up, but was it for someone else?
I don't know about trading.
Yeah, we talked about that 30th pick, and we talked about them moving up.
Oh, from 30. Yeah.
And I forget who it was for. I don't think it was for Carter,
the top corner. I think it might have been the top corner.
Oh,
whoever that corner was.
So.
Gonzalez, Weatherspoon.
Anyway, it's on the recording, so you can check it out. Anyway, but that sounds like, obviously, that's not, because we talked about it, the scenario, because it just makes way too much sense that would happen to a team that, especially a player like Carter, that values, and they just lost Hargrave, that position so much. So, yeah.
And they're gonna lose Fletcher Cox soon. They have Jordan Davis.
I think they've already kind of lost him the last couple of years. He's not playing anything like the player he used to be.
You're right. And it would be funny to watch Jalen Carter, Jordan Davis, and Nakobe Dean just take over the Philadelphia front like they did at Georgia.
I'm sure teams in the NFC East would love that. Okay. Yeah. Well, good prediction. I like it.
That's where I think we're going to see the first trade or the first big move. I mean, it is a common question and an interesting conversation. If Arizona has the same grade on Will Anderson and Jalen Carter, which one do you go with? And you can make the argument Carter's a smarter decision, because it's just harder to find that kind of guy. Not that I undervalue Will Anderson at all, but it's harder to find a Jalen Carter type presence. And it does, you could see the contracts in the NFL right now. The NFL wants interior pass rushers. It's a quicker passing attack than it used to be. Some of these edge rushers just don't have time to get there. So what do? You find your Aaron Donald, your Quinnen Williams, your Daron Payne, your Jeffrey Simmons, your Dexter Lawrence, right? All these guys are going to be making, or either are going to maybe making $25 million.
But they're so talent-wise, you have them graded close, don't you? Pretty much even.
Very close.
If that's the case, then it's a team by team need kind of thing. Then you would think, and I know Arizona really likes Rashard Lawrence, even though and even Fotu's been around a couple of years, just like Lawrence, but they've just such a big need for a pass rusher, an outside pass rusher. That's why we kind of went with Anderson. But what you're saying makes a lot of sense, that it's not going to be a surprise either way. So
right, and just personality wise, I think Arizona needs a good guy to be this pick, like a good personal. They're dealing with some stuff down there.
They can't afford to take a chance.
Have a Jalen Carter type mistake. Exactly.
All right.
Yeah. So, yeah, that's my prediction. So, yeah, I mean, the defensive tackle group, one thing that's interesting to me just after the grading process is over is there's actually a bigger gap. There is a gap between 1 and 2 on defensive tackle. But there's a bigger gap between Adebawore and Brees, my number 3 guy. So gaps exist in both areas, right? Carter to Adebawore, my number 2 D tackle, who I think I'm higher on him than everyone. And then there's an even bigger gap before we get to the next tier of D tackles.
Is that the dude from Northwestern? Okay.
Yeah. Who some have as an edge, by the way. So if you're kind of going through a draft guide and you can't find his name, some people do have him as an edge. He did line up on the edge more in college at Northwestern than he did, but he got to the Senior Bowl. They put him at 3 tech, and he tore it up. And the league is going to view him as a 3 tech.
Yeah, so just keep that in mind because we had a typo in there. We had a TCU. But I'm sure people know who that is. I just switched that over.
Yeah, same color.
Yeah, I mean, that's a name that does. It's not like Johnson. Oh, okay. Yeah, I think we know what you were talking about. But anyway, all right. So what you're saying is that, all right, so we know Carter's a top 5 guy. So the next guy, best case scenario, gets drafted.
I mean, my curveball, like I told you, I like to throw one curveball per top 10 because we see that almost every year. I think Adebawore has a shot at being a top 10 pick this year.
So that, considering you're higher on him than most people, then that would be a nice little prediction there.
Yeah. All right. Yes. Yep. And he's in play for me as soon as 7 to the Raiders.
Okay. Got it.
Based on who's calling the shots.
Now, Brzee, see, to me, these next 2 players are very interesting to talk about. Matter of fact, there was a viewer who commented on our Cansey early. We had those early videos done in January. This was pretty much just what happened during the season, and how you were going to project 2 months out. So these are early scouting reports, and Cansey has to be one of the players. Who knows? Maybe he's at the top of the list that has really moved up the draft boards more than most, and again, maybe more than any player, because you had him more as a day 3 type guy early on, and now he is a first round potential talent. Could be second, but first round, that's definitely on the table. See, so let's talk about those 2 guys now. Brzee, so I'll tell you right now, I'm not taking Brzee in the first round just because of his injury history. I just can't do it.
Yeah.
I think he's got to be, and I wouldn't be surprised if he ends up being a second round guy because of that.
That's fair. Very fair. Brzee's a puller. I've heard, and I also just have thought this since the season, his grades are going to be all over the place for a few reasons. When he arrived at Clemson, he was the best player on that defensive line right away, right? Then he suffers the injury, and then he has a couple other personal issues pop up. Even he dealt with a sickness too. I don't want to get too deep into that, but there were a lot of things that went wrong for him personally in 2022.
Yeah, and we're not saying that he was a bad seed kind of personal. These were just distractions.
Not at all. And I'll even say this: bring up the knee, right? And there have been a couple other issues with him too, physically. He doesn't have a very traditional body type. He's very top heavy. It's one of the first things you notice him. It's one of the first things I look at when I scout a player is body type. Right. I know a lot about it. It's my background, right? It's where I am professionally full time. And that's the first thing I wrote down about it. Just like it has a really odd body type. It's an athletic body type. It actually helps him move faster and more sudden, quicker. But there's something that worries me about a 300+ pounder with the kind of just the low, thin half. Like you look at his hips, how much meat and how thick he is around his hips. That's going to translate to knee issues down the road. There's a couple players in this draft that I think that way about. And look what happened. He tore his ACL. So I am completely on board with anyone who says, hey, this is too risky to take in round 1.
All right. So Cansey, where is his draft ceiling?
I'll tell you what, Peter Schrager, who very well connected to the league, when he puts something out, I read it. I know he's not doing stuff for clicks like some of the guys. And he has used his contacts to say there's 5 players that are going to get drafted higher than what people are putting out there, and his name was on that list. And because of what I said earlier about D tackles, how much their pass rush is being valued now compared to edge rushers, they're almost evening out. He could be the surprise top 10 pick in this draft. I have Adebawore, but it wouldn't surprise me to see him be the top 10 pick. And it's funny, I was slow to come around on him, partially because this year with our lads, I was in charge of the offensive stacks and scouting. So almost all of my attention was on offense until January. And then you start to see his name pop up. I hate the Aaron Donald comparisons. Other than the fact that they're small and they were good pass rushers and they wore the same uniform, the comparisons aren't there. They're just quick, right? They're quick interior rushers. But one thing he does exceptionally well is that he wins off the snap. And that's why you value interior pass rushers. It's not because they have great bend off the edge or they have great secondary moves. They win right away. And that is what's going to make him very attractive to a lot of teams.
There have been a lot, and we talked about this before too, and this is something that it's just natural and a human, and that is depending on what school, what program, what coaching staff. And there have been a lot of players, there have been a lot of really good defensive teams in the last several years at Pitt. And I mean, the coach, Narduzzi, does a tremendous job with these guys, and especially those front guys, those Cansey types, and they never seem to take that next step. All right, well, what does that mean? So it wasn't really surprising to me that he was initially not really looked at where he is now. But I just wonder whether, now again, I don't know how that came to pass, but I just find it interesting that a kid from Pitt, because I think he just could have been another one of those, oh yeah, okay, he was from Pitt, he had a really good college career, but once we get a hold of him, but he turned out to be the opposite. He turned out to be one of those guys that proved that he is better. Matter of fact, I'm not sure how many years he's been there, but it might be his best. Do you think he might be the best defensive lineman since Narduzzi took over the program?
Yeah, I do. I do. And as a college football player, does he project to the NFL to be the best? I mean, Cansey, one thing that needs to be known, if you're going to talk about his 4.6 40 or 4.67 40, I'm fine with that because it shows how athletic he is. But I don't care that much about a 40 time for D tackle. I don't think anybody should. I think you should care about the quickness, right? But if you are going to mention that and say that's a huge feather in his cap and that's why he should be a high pick, I think you have to. It's a responsibility of yours to mention the 30-inch arms, because that is off the charts in the wrong direction. And what made Aaron Donald so special, it was, yes, the quickness, the movement. His arms are long. His hands are outstanding. They were weapons as pass rushers, right? He really knew what to do before the snap, and then he knew what to do once the offense reacted to him post the snap. I mean, what makes Aaron Donald so good to me is that he doesn't need to know what you're doing, even though sometimes he does know what you're going to do, and he just knows how to beat you. But he has counter moves on counter moves on counter moves, and I have not seen that from Cansey. And those 30-inch arms, they just keep kind of and the 283-pound frame, which to an offensive lineman is easy to handle if they get their hands on him. That's the one concern. That's what keeps him out of like a true first-round grade for me, even though he's borderline.
Was Donald like in his final year, or was he there when Narduzzi took over? Because Narduzzi's been there for 8 years. So I don't remember how long Donald's been in the NFL. It's about the same. I just don't know if it's
I think Donald was there before that. I think he came out before that year.
Yeah. I let's remember when Donald came out, nobody expected this because of his size.
And I'll tell you what, if you want to bring up Donald, I mean, I will say I had him as the fifth best player in the draft that year, Aaron Donald. All right, I had him ahead of Odell Beckham. I wanted the Giants to take him. They took Beckham, and then Donald went the next pick, right? This is if you want to use him as a comparison, the comparison in this draft to Aaron Donald is Adebawore from Northwestern, like almost to a T, with measurements, speed, the style of play, the strength in his hands, the length. It's all there. So, let's just not make sure we're not comparing, the helmet that they wore.
That's what happens. And by the way, that's the thing though that does concern me. Another reason that it concerns me about Brzee and maybe even Murphy. We've talked about it with Clemson. Just a lot of these Clemson guys, they just, they just don't tend to work out. I don't know why.
Yep.
And these guys have issues. It's not like they don't have issues. Oh, you're just saying that. But like we're saying about Cansey, maybe he's going to break that mold. But these guys have those types of issues that their warning signs might be already out there.
What happens a lot, and this is actually a compliment to the coaching staff at Clemson, is that they were coached so well that there really isn't an upside beyond what they currently are. You know, we've heard this about Alabama a few times. I mean, you know, there's so many guys that come out of Alabama that some do work out, but a lot don't. A lot of guys out of that program, and it's because they were developed at such a faster rate than other programs, both strength and conditioning, but also techniques, schematically, understanding the game, that when they got to the NFL, they were already at their peak. Where really, when you're drafting someone in the NFL, you want them early on the progression curve, and they still have a ways to go. And I think that's one of the reasons why. I don't think the guys are bad football players. They just were already at their peak.
And a lot of times, too, you'll get situations where these guys are in those types of programs with a bunch of other 5- and 4-star players. They don't play a lot. So you don't get to, and when they're first-round draft picks, they're expected to play all the time. And now they got an uptick in reps, and they're just not that, like you were saying, they're not that type of player. You want to play me half the time, okay, but once you're asking for more, I'm not that type of guy. So, all right, anyway, enough of the bad news. Let's kind of move on to some of these other players. And Benton, Young, Smith, Pickens, Roy, and Wooden round up your top 10. And Benton, I think, is an interesting one in that lot. Because he came from pretty much nowhere. He wasn't somebody that was, big time player that was scouted for the last couple of years. Take a look at this guy. So, do you have him rated about equal, or do you have him higher than most?
I think I have him rated right where most have him. I mean, it's a pretty easy scouting process for him. He's a pretty clean player because when I say clean, you know he's not going to be special, but you know he's not going to bottom out. At the very least, he's going to be a really solid run defender that, you know, most teams still want. I know we're in a passing league, but everyone wants a couple run defenders or two in there. And he's really good with his hands. I think that's something that a lot of defensive line coaches in particular, they have a hard time developing with young players. And it's a hard skill to learn. It's a hard skill to acquire. Benton already has the hand game down. He's got a wrestling background. And what I like about him is he got better every single year. He got bigger and stronger every single year. And you like to see that. That's like a rhythm for him, right? Hey, I'm better than I was last year. I was better than I was last year. That's what I like most about his game.
Where do you think he's going to fit? What scheme? Best fit?
Okay, so because I do think he could fit into any scheme. I like him as a 4-3 front that plays closer to the center. Not a 3-tech, just kind of maybe a 2-gap, 4-3 defensive line.
All right, now outside your top 10, you have Dexter. Now, the kid from Baylor, was it Ika?
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
right,
Ika.
So you have him a little bit lower than some others. Then you have Brooks, Young, Coburn, Redmond, Mustafa Stills, Jamo, and Dale rounding out your top 20. Why do you have Ika at 12? Do you think he's only going to be more of a part-time guy? Is that why part of it?
Yeah. I have a few of these 3-4 D tackles that don't offer enough as pass rushers to me. And in a league where you're probably going to be on the field for 30 to 45% of the snaps, and you're not overly dominant in that one area, you know, I believe you can find that on the free agents on the street right now. I think you can find it on the street. You know, you can go find a couple D tackles right now that can fill that role. His status got a little inflated because he had 6 sacks in 2021, and then he bottomed out in 2022. And I think, you know, that was just kind of like an anomaly. I think you're going to see more of those like 1 to 2 sack type period years. So I don't think he's going to offer much as a pass rusher. And his shelf life on the field just isn't high. Like, he's not a guy that can stay on the field for 10, 15 plays.
And by the way, Brooks from Bowling Green, and I have to bring him up because how many defensive players or players, period, from Bowling Green are expected to do much in the NFL? I believe our lads even has him as a 2nd or 3rd round grade. Is that about where you have him?
I'm a little bit more early day 3 with him, early to mid day 3, because consider this, he's going to be making a position change. He actually was an edge player at Bowling Green. Really a unique player that I was shocked did not get a combine invite. I thought he was one of the biggest combine snubs.
He's the only player in the group of 5 that you have on this top 20.
Right. And so I believe that he's going to have to be a 3-tech only, just based on the size and style of play. I don't think he can be a stay-at-home run defender. and he's going to be learning a new spot. And like Cansey, there are length issues, and he already has hands usage issues. And he's making a big jump in competition too. So I believe he's a fun player to watch, and he'll be a fun player to just follow and track for 2 to 3 years. Kind of reminds me a little bit of DeMarvin Leal from Texas A&M that went to Pittsburgh last year. He was kind of like an odd body type that was
not
playing
sure
on the outside.
Yeah.
Right. So actually, I think he went to Green Bay. Sorry. So Carl Brooks, 6'3", 296. If you follow the Vikings at all, there's a guy on that defensive front named James Lynch, who was from Baylor, drafted a couple of years ago. He came into the league not really knowing where they're going to put him, but he just, you have certain packages that you feel good about lining him up in a couple of different spots. And I think he gives the defensive front a few options.
Leal went to Pitt.
Pittsburgh. Yeah, okay, he went to Pitt.
Okay, so by the way, Ramirez is the edge rusher for Eastern Michigan, is the only group of 5 player you had on the edge in your top 20. A couple of MAC guys. All right, so same question. Player that might be the most overrated. I mean, we kind of went over Brzee as that possibility. Is there someone else? Mazi Smith? Who else?
Mazi Smith would probably be the guy that we haven't talked about. Like, I have a couple concerns with Brzee and Cansey, but Mazi Smith, just to bring someone new up, everything athletically is there. There isn't anything that he's missing. And you see flashes on tape. And then you're wondering, is it just the talent that's flashing, or is he a good football player? And I still don't know. I watch a lot of his tape, and I think he's going to enter the league that way. And if someone gets really trigger happy with him and loves the tools and falls in love with what he could be, that could end up being a pick that just presents a lot of bad value.
I don't know what it is with these Michigan defenders as a Michigan fan, but it just sort of like what we said, with the part-time, and you just don't know, and it just, you don't seem to get a lot of opportunity to play unless you're playing all the time and you're a clear top 10 guy like Hutchinson. But when you're kind of one of those other guys, you just don't know. You're wondering, man, can he be or not? And that's a gamble. So that's I can't imagine. I think he would be a big gamble if he was picked. I mean, what? Because that's a guy that could end up being a late first-round draft pick if somebody falls in love with him.
Yeah. I wouldn't be surprised to see his name called the first-round pick. Just the tools. The tools are ideal, really.
Maybe he'll go to Baltimore.
They fit into a lot of – he could. It'd be
this former coordinator.
That would be a good front for him. That would be a good front for him.
Okay, and then home run? Who could hit a home run in that group?
And you're talking like a steal,
from 11
like
to 20.
I'll tell you what. I like 19 to 20. Moro Jomo from Texas is intriguing to me. Just really, really nice blend of bend and length that if it's used correctly, coached correctly, and he develops a little bit more lower body strength, can, in some cases, be unbeatable for one blocker. A guy that can play as heavy as he does, with the length he does, with the amount of bend that he has. It's just a rare combination of traits.
You didn't say 19 to 20, did you? I said 11 to 20.
You said 11 to 20?
Why would I say 19 to 20? No.
Oh, no. No. 19 he's number 19 on my board.
I want to make sure you didn't hear me wrong. By the way, Dexter, you have at 11. And I think our lads has him rated higher than you, correct?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people do.
Okay.
Some people are saying day 2 pick because of the tools. He is Chris Jones from Mississippi State to a T in terms of just like what he has physically, size, length, speed. And when you first watch him, if you catch the right play, you're going to say, dude, that guy looks like a first-round pick. You watch all of his tape, and it's maddening. It's a very frustrating kid to watch. I've never seen someone so slow, so late off the ball so many times. Like the offense is 2 steps into the progression. He's still in his stance. And I don't know if there's a mental check there. Again, kind of a crappy coaching situation. Florida has not done a good job of developing really good talent in recent years. So maybe he is someone there. I bet he goes a lot higher than where I currently have him. He could be a day 2 pick.
It's that program thing again. That's how I feel about these Florida kids.